Why should employees be shareholders in your business? The answer is they maybe shouldn't be. In today's episode, I'm going to walk you through a conversation I had with somebody this week who runs a business and is contemplating offering shares to an individual, actually to a couple of individuals, to incentivize them and to make them feel like they are part of the team. So I'm going to break down our conversation in hopes that if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner wrestling with or trying to figure out how to get some direction on making employees shareholders, hopefully you find some of the things I covered today helpful. And again, this is all based on my experience running businesses, having been a part of successful businesses, having been instrumental in the failure of some of them, and generally spending my day trying to manage a portfolio of businesses, as well as interacting with my colleagues, other entrepreneurs, and other business owners. I'm not a lawyer, not an accountant, just sharing some things I think you'd find helpful. So here's how the conversation unfolded. Hey, Dylan. We'd like to make, there's a couple of people on our team, we would like to extend them the offer of becoming shareholders. And I said, that's great. Why do you want to do that? And they said, well, we want to make them feel like they are valued. We're a small business, and so we feel it gives us a competitive advantage in order to attract them and to make them stay. And as far as I could tell, they were giving all the right answers because let's face it, as a business owner, we value things differently than maybe our teams do. And so for us, the logic would follow that because we are shareholders, that of course everyone would want to be a shareholder. But I'm not sure that that is clear thinking. I'm not sure that that is right thinking. And so here's how the rest of the conversation went. I said, well, as a business, have you ever taken dividends? Well, no, no, not really. I said, have you ever paid yourself a bonus? No, not really. Is your company ever sitting on cash? No, not really. So why would someone want to be a shareholder of a company that doesn't pay out dividends, doesn't pay out bonuses, and isn't sitting on cash? What's the actual reason someone would want to be a shareholder? Well, because it gives them like ownership in something that one day will be valuable. Aha! And there's the key. So then when pressed, I said, well, how valuable are the shares going to be? The owner said, well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I said, well, so let's make this even simpler. I said, how valuable do you want the shares to be? And what is your exit strategy in this particular business? Because presumably, if you're the shareholder and you're doing all of these things to create value, clearly you must know what you're working towards. Well, if I could maybe sell the business one day and pay off my mortgage and maybe have some walking around money, that would be great. And I said, okay, so given that answer, if you were talking to somebody who wasn't inside of your business and you had to explain to them that they should invest in your business because that is your strategy, how attractive does that sound? And I think that was the moment when the light bulb went on and he kind of understood, I think, the fundamental challenge that comes with making employees shareholders in your business. At a conceptual level, it sounds great. It sounds like it checks all the boxes. But in the absence of a goal, in the absence of a plan, an employee may consider that to just be a token gesture, but it doesn't necessarily translate into anything that's going to move the needle. So what I suggested to this particular individual, and this is kind of how I think about it, and I'd be curious to hear what you think, so drop some comments below or send me an email or a message, or we can talk about your business if you want. But the way I look at it is to say, look, a 5-year plan for any small business, I think, is just too long of a plan. It's nice to kind of have the goalposts somewhere, but somewhere between 1 and 3 years is the right planning time frame. So if you said to yourself, we want our business to be worth X in 3 years, and X is just a number. You just decide what you want it to be worth. You're the owner. I mean, presumably you're getting up every day to build a valuable business for some purpose. If you've never really stopped to put a number on paper, then pause this episode, go to a piece of paper, write it down, and then come back and let's talk through the rest of this. Because in the absence of knowing what value you're trying to create, then it doesn't make any sense that you would ask someone to be a part of that in hopes that they might have a greater interest in continuing to be on your team or contributing in a more meaningful way than what their salary might provide for. So That's where it all starts. I think there is a contrast between, I think there's a simple contrast between a business owner that says, I'm looking to sell a $15 million business in 3 years. You're going to be a part of that. And I can't pay you the competitive salary that you could get going to a bigger company, but we're a small company, so we offer some freedom. We offer lots of flexibility, but we also want you to get a piece of the action. We want you to participate in what our goal is. So I'm going to make you a shareholder. So contrast that very simply against a business owner that says, hey, Ricky, really love what you're doing here. Would love to make you a shareholder in the business. I'm not really sure where we're going. Don't really know what the shares are going to be worth. But by me extending you this offer of being a shareholder, you should be grateful. It should be exciting for you because, look, we get to do this together. And I really hope that that changes the outcome for you and how you contribute to our business. Any person is going to pick the first scenario over the second scenario, notwithstanding that in both scenarios, the intent of the entrepreneur or the business owner was to convey an idea that, hey, I think you're valuable and I would like to recognize you for that value. And becoming a shareholder seems to be the easiest way to do that. If the incentive is to recognize the value that the employee or your team is contributing to the business, then it follows that they should be able to make a direct connection to what you're looking to achieve and how they can contribute to that. Remember, you're the leader. Everyone needs to be led, even if they don't want to admit it. People need to know where the goalposts are and what you're working towards. And if you're looking for more out of your team, you want them to be more focused, you want them to contribute more effort, and you are holding over them or you are offering them shares in your business, then you have to be able to articulate to them what the end goal is. That doesn't mean you have to be correct, by the way. The pushback I got from the individual I was meeting with, he was like, look, I did this once before. They said the company was going to be worth $50 million. None of us believed it was going to be worth that much, but we all went along with it because he was the owner and we were just the employees, and it never materialized. So I'm a little bit cynical. And I said, okay, but just because that is your point of reference doesn't mean that that's correct. By virtue of it being an unreasonable amount of money, that probably tells me something about the leader himself and his style. There's one way to build consensus. There's another way to just simply dictate. And I think these days, certainly working with non-baby boomer team members, so Gen X, millennials for sure, you are able to say, look, I believe our company can be worth $15 million in 3 years, and I'd like you to be a part of that. Here's how I get to that thinking. You then look for your team to tell you whether or not they believe it is or isn't valuable, and you then make an adjustment. You don't want your team to say, oh, yeah, great, I want to be a shareholder, but behind your back saying, you know what, they're never going to meet these numbers. You want it to be a collective exercise because they are going to be the ones that help you get there. So why should employees be shareholders in your business? They should be shareholders because they may be able to get you there faster, or they may be able to make sure you get there. The challenge is you have to define where there is. And my experience is most entrepreneurs don't answer that question for themselves, and most business owners certainly can't answer it for anybody else. So before you go down the road of looking to attract employees via an employee stock option program or offering them shares in your business, just recognize what dynamic is at play. You think it's a great idea because you have some aspirations. Hopefully you have defined them, but most business owners don't. And you believe that you are extending to someone some recognition of their contribution by offering them shares. But remember, if life doesn't work out and they are shareholders and you have to unwind it, it can get pretty messy pretty quick. And so it's easier to set the bar for yourself, translate that into what it means for the business, and then be able to say to those that you want to recognize, here is where we are going. I'd like you to benefit from us getting there. As such, please become a shareholder, and that will form part of your compensation. And so for me, this is always, conceptually, it's a great idea, but practically when it hits the ground, it's usually only exciting for the moment that you have the conversation, and it isn't exciting the next day because no one even knows what we're all trying to be. I remember in 2 companies, I was given the option to purchase shares. One company was going public, one company was very early stage, and I thought it was a great overture because at least the owner had recognized my contribution. Not just mine, but those that were on our team as well. So after that initial excitement died down, a week later, a month later, 6 months later, no one really knew what those shares were going to be worth. No one even really had an understanding of how to calculate some rough math on what it could be worth because the entrepreneurs themselves, the business owners, didn't even know. They did it as a gesture, but they didn't really think through it. And so then what happened is as the company continued to miss its goals and miss its targets and miss its milestones, the level of excitement of everyone on the team began to dissipate because their expectation was that at some point this train is moving forward to a destination. We don't know where the destination is, but we know we own a piece of it. As it looked like the train just kept going in circles, everyone's spirits tended to die down and they lost interest. And I'm here on this episode because I ultimately wasn't a part of either of those opportunities as it went forward. So why should employees be shareholders in your business? They should be shareholders if you think they're going to contribute meaningfully to a meaningful, specific, well-defined goal. If you're not going to be able to put a well-defined goal in place, if it's not going to be meaningful, then really the gesture is nice when you make it, but it quickly loses its shine after the fact. So hopefully that gives you something to think about. If you're an entrepreneur or a business owner, your bargaining chip of shares is a real bargaining chip, but only if it's backed up by a plan that people believe the organization can meet. Not that it has to be a laydown, but certainly it can't be so ridiculous that no one can even begin to understand it, or you just have to work harder to show them how that's going to happen. They're a great option. They are a great tool. They do serve the purpose that they need to serve. So giving employees shares in your business works, but it works really well if you can create context and create some milestones. And again, if you listen to these episodes, there's always a common theme. It always rolls back to you, the entrepreneur or the business owner. If you yourself haven't set your own goals in place, if you don't know how you're going to exit your business, I think it's a stretch to say, well, I'm just going to offer my team shares in my business, and hopefully all of us at some point, it will all make sense and we will all benefit from this. So there's an easier way to get a benefit out of it. There's an easier way to recognize some value and get the outcomes that you want, but it does require some thinking. So thanks for tuning in to this week's today's episode, which again reflects a conversation that literally I just had with somebody. And if you want to talk about your business, let's do it. Let's chat. Let's get on a call together. It's 15 minutes on Zoom or Teams. Send an email. And if you're trying to work through this very issue for yourself, I certainly would be happy to share with you what I've learned, the pros, the cons, and would encourage you to take advantage of that. So thanks for tuning in.